Hey, my name's Ian. Like he said, I work at Lonely Planet, and today I'm going to talk about performance, specifically about Lonely Planet, but a bit more generally. And this is kind of a lot of this is quite theoretical rather than stuff that we're actually doing at Lonely Planet, but it's stuff that we really wanted to do for a long time. So, Lonely Planet, if you don't know, is it's all about travel advice, travel guides. Historically, for 40 years, I've been a publishing company and a very bad technology company. And I'm a big critic of it. It's nice to think we're still pretty bad, but we're getting better. And the idea is basically to get everything that we have online and to make that our new business model rather than publishing. So I want to talk about performance. So when I joined Lonely Planet 3 years ago, performance was one of our KPIs. It was super important for every single feature and everything that we did. And I was kind of also fortunate in that the 3 years prior to my work at Lonely Planet, I'd been traveling around the world and using their website, or failing to use it because it never loaded. It was just so slow. And it was impossible to use. And this is one of the challenges that we have, is that we don't really know who our typical user is on a day-to-day. Yeah, they could be out on the road. They could be using an internet cafe where they're sharing a fast Wi-Fi connection perhaps, but between 50 people, 100 people sometimes. Or they could be at their desk fantasizing about their next trip and on a really fast connection, and all they want is inspiration, basically. So these three kind of different contexts are for us, and we don't think that's unique to us, because we think that you can actually have all of those different contexts in one train journey in England. You go in and out of connectivity. Even if you're on the Wi-Fi, it'll cut out all the time. And we want to make sure that our site is actually usable in all those different contexts. So it's not that hard to get fast. There are lots of online guides, blogs, rules. It's not hard to get reasonably fast. You put your scripts at the bottom, whatever. There's always rules. But to get decently fast, it's a bit harder. You have to read this book. It's like 300 pages, and then this one, it's another 300 pages, and this one's 450 pages. And then you have to go to VelocityConf, and that's really expensive, and read all the blogs, and then keep up to date with how the browsers change all the time. Because, it's impossible, basically, but you can do all right. So, I got this design, which was for our previous incantation of the homepage, and the job was essentially build this, and if it's fast, that's really good. But it's this really, really image-heavy page, which is a challenge in anything. But if we want to talk about making something performant for all the users in different contexts, or maybe a user that's in an internet cafe somewhere, this is a pretty tricky thing to do. But it is possible. You throw all those hacks that you've read in all those books, and you can get it to like a reasonable state. Which, it's still not brilliant, right? So it's like 3.4 seconds or whatever. The left one, sorry, is an optimized version, and then we spent like 4 or 5 days optimizing. Yeah, I think that's okay, whatever. So, I don't know what else. Let's forget that. So, after you've done all that work, so it renders in like 0.8 seconds, and it's finished in 3 seconds, and the total weight is 600 kilobytes, which is pretty decent considering how image heavy that page is. Until you scroll down. The reason that's true is that the way we built it, the way we could actually accomplish that, was to defer everything below the fold, so that we don't actually load in the images until you move down the page. And I mean, you could argue this is a decent approach, and it was probably the best we could do. But it doesn't really help like this user that much, because they might actually need the links at the bottom, and the images can provide quite a lot of context. And it definitely doesn't help people who are roaming, because like this is a pet peeve of mine. Here we have, this is like my phone, well, the screen anyway. So £3 a megabyte. If you scroll down that page, it will hit like 2.4 megabytes, which is what, £7. Is that really worth £7 going to that website? I'm pretty sure it's not worth £7. Especially if it's just a bunch of links, and then you got to go to the next page, and that's another £5. You know, this doesn't cut it for me, I don't think, and it shouldn't cut it for a lot of us. So it's all about compromise. When I got that design, we pushed back on a few things, but really there was no other way of making it lighter. It's a compromise between you and your designer, but it's also a compromise for what you can serve to your users, how you can make it best for them. You always end up compromising for like the middle. So you can add another book to the list, which is another one, which is by Lara Hogan. It's coming out very soon, and I'm sure this will be excellent. And it will cover kind of a lot of these details. But really, my point is that you can only get as fast as the design allows you to do. If the design has big image at the top, you're kind of stuck with that, and that's the decision that has been made to help you use it. So performance context. I don't think this is a thing, but maybe it becomes a thing. So we have to accept, like in a sort of pseudo-Socratic way, that there are loads of things we don't know about our users, and accepting that is actually the first part of perhaps achieving like something which is useful for all of these different types of users. But until then, and historically, we just have to make assumptions. We can infer so much based on what the device might give you, or the heuristics of the user, but we're always kind of assuming. And this goes back to, I guess the first like big assumption of responsive web design was that users wanted a different experience on mobile than they wanted to have on a desktop. I think this has been kind of firmly debunked. You know, the person on their mobile on their sofa is no different device-wise to the person on their mobile like on a 3G connection. But actually their user experience would be completely different. So that was pushed to the side. But we still have this cropping up every now and again in discussions on performance. I think like a recent talisman of web performance is web fonts and people's hatred for them. And you often see people saying things like, well, I'll only serve it to desktop, I won't serve that font to mobile. But this is then kind of correlating viewport and network connectivity or network speed, which it really just has no relation between the size of the screen and the actual speed. If you're not going to serve it to mobile, don't serve it to desktop, or do both. And the second assumption, which, this is kind of broken, yeah, we have this, we like to put metrics against things all the time. And a while ago, it was the users want every site loaded in 3 seconds, and then it went down to 2 seconds. And now it's about getting it to glass in 1 second, and having that initial kind of experience start before the 1 second mark. And I don't know, I'm not so convinced by this. I think like, so these 2 sites, yes, like that's a really, I mean, on a whole, this assumption is brilliant for the web because we can push for performance at all times. And I think these 2 sites are good examples of people having that expectation. This site, I would say people would be kind of concerned if it took 3 seconds, like this would be my 80 cents down or whatever. And sites that have huge interactive experiences feel completely different to users. I don't know how many of you have seen this one. This is quite old now. It was a Chrome experiment back when HTML5 was still a buzzword. And it kind of mashed up your postcode and Street View and Google Maps with a music video, and it was fantastic. It took like 2 minutes to start. You just had to wait there, ticking over and over while these little birds flew around. But no one cared. Everyone was pretty happy. It was amazing. People shared it, and those people were happy to wait too. So I don't think we can put like an X seconds against an experience, really. I think users expect and want an experience in line with their own expectations, and it's not impossible to guide them towards a different expectation. But because we have all these unknowns, serving this same one experience across like many contexts is always going to be a compromise. And currently we don't really have the tools to do anything about this. We can't glean these insights from the device heuristics. But this isn't good enough, because the web's for everyone, as we know. And people on low-power devices, on low-connected areas, will be unable to actually load your site in a lot of times. Now, how can we actually determine a user performance context? How do we know what they want? How do we know if they want a really fast experience and just the bare essentials? And when do we know if they want to learn more about destination or really kind of dig deep into an experience in their website? Well, I think rather than guessing and assuming based on width, screen widths and all that kind of stuff, that we could just ask them. Why not just ask them? Why not put this in the user's power rather than us trying to assume for them? And this was something that I've kind of really wanted to do for ages but never had the opportunity, is to build hostel mode for Learning Planet, which would just be this super slimmed down experience where you just get exactly what you need. I've been in the position of trying to log on to Learning Planet's website from an internet cafe just to find a bed to sleep in that night and being unable completely to load it. And this happens a lot. But someone beat us to it, YouTube. YouTube released YouTube Feather, which is no relation, but I'm going to claim a bit of it anyway. And YouTube Feather was I thought it was fascinating. This guy, Chris Zacharias, ran this experiment, and he wanted to see if you could get YouTube under 100 kilobytes. And I think the size at the time was about 1.4 megabytes. So he set up a branch and he deleted everything except really the video. The comments went, related videos went, loads of stuff went, and he got it down to 100 kilobytes. And he shipped it to 1% of people and left it for a week. And when he dug into the data after a week, he found that the median latency time, the median load time, had shot right up. Had gone from 3 or 4 seconds to 20 seconds. Something huge. Which made no sense because he just cut the size of the page by 10-fold. So he kind of dug around the bugs and all this kind of stuff and made sure it wasn't a fault before looking more deeply into the data and analyzing it by geography. And he found that the majority of the traffic was coming from very low connected areas. So Africa, Southeast Asia, some of South America had spikes in traffic. And they were starting to load the pages, but they were taking 20 seconds. And he found that these pages had been completely inaccessible to these users before. He ran tests based on the old site, and some were taking 20 minutes to load the page. And that's not to play the video, that's to get the first frame of the video. So by enabling this different context, a very slimmed down performance, lightweight mode, he opened up the site to all these new markets. If you're after traffic, this could be an amazing way in emerging markets to actually boost your traffic, and just to give people an opportunity to actually use your website, which might be unusable if you don't know. Facebook also did something similar. They sent their Android team to Africa to learn about low connected devices and to actually understand firsthand how difficult it can be to use their applications in these environments. And this is a really, really interesting blog post which I will link to, which gives a lot of detail about the different issues they found. But one of the big things is the data plans were just shot immediately. If you have a fixed data plan, it's not going to last. It's not going to last at all. Not when the typical website is 1.5 megabytes these days. So I think there is definitely benefit in this idea, this theory of splitting out into a light mode and the default mode. This is my design skills at their best right here. But even with these two, and this is a very powerful kind of segmentation, I feel like we still make assumptions. We have the light stage, that's cool, we've done that, but everything above it, we're still assuming stuff all the time. Retina, for example. Did we ever ask users with Retina screens if they wanted slower experiences, or wanted to download more data, or actually wanted crisper images? Or did we just assume that they did? No, we just assumed. And why? It doesn't make any sense, right? So, are we still compromising as well with this default stage? I think we are. I think we're not using the web for what it could be used for, because we have to take bandwidth into account. But that person who's sat at their desk on their employer's computer using their employer's bandwidth and happy to wait, we can push so much more experience into it. And you don't have to say no as often to design this. Like, this is something that our designer wanted to do. We wanted to put like an auto-playing background and make this page feel quite immersive, feel quite experiential. And I had to say no, because it's irresponsible to push 3 megabytes of video onto someone to autoplay. You can't do that. It's just not an option. But if you allow somebody to opt into this by default on a site-wide scale, suddenly you open up this ability to do all sorts of stuff like this. Video is just like the piece of the pie. So you move from this default to having 3 different tiers. And this segmentation allows design focused user experiences and to split up how we deliver assets to different users. So this is kind of the general idea. I think the hard part is really asking the user, because to accomplish this isn't too bad. You could spend years optimizing this part, I'm sure. YouTube just had a page which you had to find. I think it was firstly word of mouth which did it, and you could opt into feather mode. And it just sets a cookie against your user or whatever, and then you're just in feather mode. You haven't opted out of that. I use it all the time. It's way faster, it's really enjoyable. But there's other ways we could do it a bit more naturally. If we know, like from our CRM or from whatever reasons, that people are going on trips, that they're going to countries which might cost them a lot of money on data roaming, we can send them helpful emails and just say, we're not prying on their lives here, we're just giving them an opportunity, and there's nothing for us to gain from it except making their travel easier and putting money that would be going to Vodafone or Deutsche Telekom to the local environment, the local community. And maybe we can go even further. Maybe it's not just per user where you set this cookie, but per user's device. I think this would be super cool to be able to set my iPhone to light mode and my work computer to desktop. Work computer to enhanced. And this isn't impossible. This is very doable. We're not generalizing on UA strings or IPs or UUIDs. We're doing it per user, so we can focus directly on. And we can make this easily accessible from a menu. So, like I said, we're not doing this in production at the moment because our platform isn't really stable enough, I don't feel, for me to sort of push this forward. It would be easily deployable, but I don't think we're ready for it quite yet. But this is an example of how it could look. It's all kind of gone off the screen a bit, unfortunately. But this is our France page. Has 2 fonts. It has loads of imagery. But we can switch it to what I'm doing there is clicking on enhanced mode. We refresh that, and the enhanced experience could be anything, but I just made it a massive image for the moment because I have 0 skills in design. And then flick it into light mode, and all we can do then is we can just turn off all images, turn off all the fonts, and just serve a really base, simple experience which gives the user what they want. This is the basis really of just the idea. I would give some implementation advice on this if you were thinking of trying it, which I think you should do. At least try it and just see how it might work for you if you have these different kind of user bases. Don't build 3 different websites. That would be the worst thing you could do. One website, different context, that's it. Abstract out this complexity. So if you've seen the cut and mustard technique, which is quite prevalent these days, of separating browsers into more advanced ones and leaving the other ones behind, we do this at LP. So running a few tests to make sure that we have certain things, and if they do that, we load the JavaScript, we load some fonts, whatever, icons. We just added that we could add LP hostile mode into this test, and we immediately push everything that is light into the non-compliant mode, and they get the kind of base experience. And with images, if this is our template, where we have image tag and module image in the middle, we would just override this helper. And if we're in hostile mode, we just return. We're not going to actually return an image, we're just going to return the and just keep getting the page. And that's, with those two files or whatever, is how I did that example. It was like 5 lines of code to flip between those two things. The only other thing is, if you're running a stateless system, which means you can't toggle this stuff on the server, you have to do everything on the client in JavaScript, this can still be accomplished, although it will probably be slightly more complex. And you also wouldn't be able to take advantage of browser lookaheads and using the preloader, because you're then having to define all your assets in JavaScript. But it's not impossible, or it's not too far of a reach to ponder the idea of this user choice being available in the browser as an opt-in, opt-out. This is something that is kind of like buried also in the new picture specification, that eventually you might have a way that the browser can actually make inferences on source set based on if you've opted in or opted out. If you're on a flaky connection, you can just opt out high-res images. So, to recap, I think you can only get as fast as design allows. You can throw every hack in the book, but if you have a design which is not built for lightweight pages, or not built for users who we wouldn't usually consider a site that you'd go to, you only get that so fast. And segmenting that user experience doesn't have to be 3 segments. It could be 1, it could be 2 or 3, or maybe even 4. But that can be quite powerful. It can allow you to be much more focused. And it might actually let people around the globe see your design who previously couldn't. Don't guess, don't assume, ask. There are some things which we can't assume from the device, and we should stop doing that because it's a real waste of time. Sometimes we just need to ask, and I think users can be quite responsive to this. But don't do it at the expense of your application becoming complex. This is one thing that we drive against all the time at LP, because we have such a massive code base. Complexity is a real tech debt, like fire happening. So if you're going to do this, do it in kind of the way that I exposed there with helpers, or completely different ways, but make sure that when you're actually developing, it just feels like you're developing a regular site, whether or not they toggle on and off. That can just adapt naturally. That's all I have. I encourage you to try out this kind of thing and see how it will help you. But yeah, thank you for listening.
Ian, that was awesome. Thanks so much. This is a very important topic, performance. Someone said it in the audience. We can go on with a couple of more questions from the audience. Please have a seat. Thanks again for the talk. So, you talked a lot about markets, like developing countries and stuff like that. Someone asked, how is it possible, or do you even test in those areas? Like, do you have test devices over there, or how do you do that?
We don't. We have. So our test suite for abroad would be web page test, and where they have devices available, which isn't very many of those, but there are a few. But we have, everyone who works at LP loves to travel. Mm-hmm. So whenever anyone goes away, and that happens a lot to like Thailand, Southeast Asia, that kind of places, I always get them to feedback, to like load the site and feedback in that way. But we don't have like a killer way of testing it automated.
Okay, so you travel a lot yourself. There was a screenshot from your phone where you are on the data plan and stuff like that. So you're testing what you actually do. Another thing that someone was interested in, for example, people came in by train. For example, you talked about the 2 different modes that you have on a web page. Do you automatically detect in any way what to serve to the user?
No, I don't think you can. That's the problem. I think there's no way to detect a flaky connection, even if someone's on Wi-Fi. that can be flaky. Some can be on a desktop but tethering on 3G. These are impossible things to actually try and guess. So I would not try and guess, because I think you're more likely to frustrate the user than to actually help them.
Yeah, that's okay. Thanks so much, Ian, again for a nice talk. And yeah.